Wanted to welcome you all to the ArtTable Artist Breakfast, and thank you for coming out in the cold. It's hard this morning, but it's going to be well worthwhile because we have two great art world luminaries here, Paula Hayes, who I've known for over 20 years, we just figured out, and Brooke Kamin Rapaport, who has been doing really wonderful things at Madison Square Park Conservancy as the Senior Curator. So Paula, I was trying to think how to describe you, and I decided that you defied definition. Paula's an artist, but she's also a landscape designer. She's a botanist. She creates functional objects. She's a maker, and she's a poet. She works really on a micro level. Many of you may be familiar with her hand-blown glass terrariums, which kind of defy physics in a way. You see these incredible worlds within these very small capsules. And she also works on this very immersive environmental level. She creates installations that really take you in, and they're experiential, they're spiritual, and they have a real physical component. I love Paula's work because it's never passive. It really demands a lot from the viewer. It demands a viewer to sort of stop and feel and think and pause. When I first worked with Paula 20 years ago, she made her I think it was your first living sculpture, which really defined the next, at least, decade plus of her work. And what was so interesting about that is the work, if you purchased a work, if you acquired a work, you received a contract, which told you how you had to care for the work, and so it demanded a relationship, it demanded maintenance, and that was a really kind of a radical idea. Art often has a very different role. Now, many years later, I've been working with Paula for the last 8 years, and she continues to be incredibly innovative, pushing the kind of traditional boundaries between art and design and landscape design. And I'm so excited about these two new bodies of work you've worked on, but I've been there in the background over the last 2 years, really developing them. I'm not going to tell you too much about it because they're going to speak about those. And then many of you already know our fellow ArtTable member, Brooke Kamin Rapaport, who is the Martin Friedman Senior Curator at Madison Square Park Conservancy. For the past 20 years, Brooke has been curatorial force in the New York art world. She was curator at the Brooklyn Museum, where she worked on numerous exhibitions, and you were very involved in the Grand Lobby artist installation series, which I always enjoyed. I thought they were fabulous. She is a writer, a lecturer, an art blogger, a guest curator. The Houdini show at the Jewish Museum was fabulous. I know that traveled and brought my kids. That was amazing. And you're doing such interesting and innovative and really kind of powerful programming at Madison Square Park. It's a true destination, and you've really sort of changed the face of that public square and our sort of access to public art. So anyway, I turn the table over to Brooke and Paula.
I'm always so thrilled to be at an ArtTable event. There's always great camaraderie amongst ArtTable members and friends. And especially thrilled this morning to be here with Paula to talk about her work. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Paula. Paula has consistently used plant materials and garden design in her work. And as Alyssa said, she's best known for her plant-filled terrariums. Her work has been acquired for gardens and museums and galleries in the United States and internationally. She has had, her works has been on view at the Museum of Modern Art in the lobby, which we will show a slide of in a little bit, the Museum of Arts and Design in New York, Lever House, the Wexner Center, OMI International Arts Center in Ghent, New York, the Queen's Museum, and on. And Paula was born in Concord, Mass. She received her Bachelor of Science from Skidmore College and her MFA from Parsons School of Design. I first met Paula virtually about 12 years ago because I was writing an article on plant artists for Sculpture magazine. And Paula and I bonded, and when we finally met in person, I was very, very delighted. And I have followed and been amazed by Paula's work because she's able to convey a very high level of intellectual thought and complex ideas to the general public. And I think that her project in Madison Square Park really is evidence of that. Paula lives successfully with plants. She thinks that they're fundamental to ecological and human survival. When she was a child in upstate New York, she was raised on a family farm that grew corn and hay and potatoes. In addition to her master's degree in sculpture, she's steeped in horticulture. She's interned with a master grower and an experienced horticulturalist and an agricultural farmer. This is a view of one of Paula's gazing globes in Madison Square Park. Paula made a real transformation this year in her material. She went from using soil and ferns and fronds and plant materials and moss to using, in the gazing globes, old batteries, vintage radio parts, computer toss-offs, vacuum tubes, shredded rubber tires, and silicone. In addition, these works are mass-produced. The orb is mass-produced. It's polycarbonate, and that is new for Paula because she usually uses blown glass in her terrariums. Her proposal to us is on the lower right, and we have some images that we just shot of the Gazing Globes installation in Madison Square Park. So I think we should start by going backwards a little and talking about what is the legacy for Paula Hayes when she thinks about the great earthworks, Robert Smithson, Heiser, and that is what you would think Paula would kind of represent the next generation of artists who work with the land and plants. Of course, we know that earthworks were enormous, outsize pieces that took over the American West. Paula, in her work, has created objects that use some of the same materials as the earth artists, but they are intimate and on a human scale. So Paula, do you want to start off by talking about the legacy of earthworks for you?
Yes. First, I'll just say it's a great honor to be here and to be in a room of women feels so futuristic. Such a great feeling. So I'll just leave it there. So in regard to history of earthworks and my take on that, it's related to what I just said, actually. I think that a woman artist and the history of land art, I think that relationship between scale and that intimacy of viewing the living work and peering into the vessel and caring for it, as Alyssa alluded to, this agreement that I made back in the 90s with the living works was so crucial to my intention. And that intention was a two-way street, actually. Not to be rude, but more than a contract, it was an agreement between myself and the person who was going to care for the living work. I, too, remained a participant throughout my life and past my life in my intention of being devoted to living works. And though the works currently at Madison Square Park do not have living plants in them, they remain living works, and I can speak to that in a little bit. The scale of this, and you can see very evidently the female aspect of it, and the history of the form, of the female form in works of art historically, prehistoric, we can say even, but the care of it, the nurturing that goes along with staying devoted to something, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's not part of your busy lifestyle. I, to this day, I care for many of my living works that have been living in glass vessels for over 10 years when we had our first show at Salon 94 called Forest. They're in my studio or in my home in New York or my home upstate. And, you know, sometimes I'm so busy, sometimes I'm tired, sometimes I just can't get to it. I'm like, to my husband, like, I've got to get out of the studio and water terrariums. You know, it's like, or the electricity, or like, you know, something like, and I make, somehow we got to carry them all over to the light, you know. This is so much of a maternal, I feel, or paternal, of caregiving. This was my intention with the living work. The agreement, and it was a two-way street between me and the person who I entered into this agreement with, that the work could not exist without this participation, and mine as well. And this grew out of my own experience in life, because I had children when I was very young. I grew up on a farm. I saw how farmers work. I see how their dedication to it. We have a horticulturist here. A horticulturist knows that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're tired. It doesn't matter if you're busy. It doesn't matter. Plants, pets, children, family members. We are called upon to respond. And that responsibility is something that was inherent in the intention of that work. It shows up, to my surprise, in the most surprising way, in the public work that is at Madison Square Park, and I can speak to that a little bit later. I could run on about this for a little bit.
Here is an installation view of Paula's project at Lever House, which was in 2012. And I also want to show you her piece at the Museum of Modern Art, which was in the lobby and received enormous notice because it was the first time that a living sculpture was in the museum lobby. Can you talk about that, Paula? Were you surprised at the reaction? It really made a lot of news that there was plant life in the museum, and it was unconventional.
Well, the thing that's unconventional has to do with conservation of the permanent collection. Wherever there is a space that is already a place problematic for the conservation of art, say the lobby, where there's a lot of, especially, let's take this space specifically. This is between two avenues. It is actually a public space that is open to the public. You don't have to engage with the art collection in order to travel between two avenues. This allowed Anne Temkin to be able to embrace the idea of having living work soils in the museum, and this was it was kind of a wonderful opportunity. She actually came to me and said, "Paula, I need a miracle," and so for this lobby. And I immediately, like, it was in the no, it's actually, most of my ideas, this hadn't happened recently, but at that time period, many of my ideas came out taking a bath. I don't know why. It was kind of like the bathysphere kind of thing, womb kind of thing, I don't know. But I took the cab ride home, I got into I was taking a bath, and this idea came into my mind about this thing I had seen about the way these hermaphroditic slugs mate, and this miraculous thing that they do. I'll leave you with that. You can look it up. It's this fantastic online thing. It's just so beautiful. This miraculous thing, how they find each other in the night and how they intertwine, and they make this diaphanous, beautiful, I have children now, this diaphanous, beautiful shape, and then they fall to the ground, and so go on the slugs. And the thing was that, slugs in gardening, we all think like, oh, slugs, it's like, oh, no. And then after I saw that, I was like, slugs are really like miracles, and that all of life is a miracle. At this moment, especially that they're hermaphroditic and they find each other and do this dance and create this form. So that's where the forms came from, and then I just started, drawing, and then we, created the forms, and it becomes very elaborate. And when I then presented this to Anne, and as an idea, it was of a scale that was going to be, pretty intense for the lobby. It was like, yes, we have to do this, and that it had life. It was like, life is flowing through there, and we worked in a way that we just protected the permanent collection. So what I have found is lobbies are a really good place for my work because that's where a lot of interaction is. There's a lot of life, and if there's permanent collections, they're kind of like protected anyway. So it's that place of the flow of life, that place where life is kind of a little bit out of control anyway, that you can bring it in. That was sort of a gateway to being able to see how this aspect of the out of control, the Pandora's box, how we can put safety measures in place to still protect the permanent collection.
Can you talk about the symbolism? This is Paula's piece of the Museum of Arts and Design and the biennial. Can you talk about the symbolism of creating a terrarium? Is there a metaphor you're going for?
Yeah, this is a very long story. We have to you got to put brackets around this, but the terrarium is so important to me. It's very related to the Gazing Globes, which is at Madison Square Park, in that there is a very particular period of time, mid-19th century, the Victorian era, where the Industrial Revolution just gets going, and we are in we are in such a pace right now that I don't know about you, but I cannot keep up. I'm constantly oh my God, how I need this app, I need that, my brain is so full, I don't know what to do. But it started there, and I always refer to that as the real Big Bang for humanity. Things really just from there it's just escalating, it's exponential. And the terrarium originally was the Wardian case. It was bringing plants from one continent to another. It took 3 months. And so taking it from South America to England in a boat took 3 months, and how are you going to keep them alive? And it was really this fascination with something exotic, something that, it's so beautiful, it's from far away, But also it had to do with something that produced a material that could then become a commodity. And, my intention originally was I think it was to create this, tribe of caregivers. And it's really wild to me that it did that. It exploded. I mean, to this day, I see little, kind of their versions of my terrariums. They're everywhere. They're like magnets on refrigerators or cookies, it's just the craziest thing. My mom has one that my cousin gave her. It looks like, she goes, oh, it looks like just like in your book. I'm like, yeah, Mom, I know. It's just I would have given you one. But it's so funny because it's the commodification of that original intention of wanting to have this tribe of caregivers, but it becomes the commodification of that idea. But I just kind of let it go because it did just that. It did create the tribe of caregivers. Everyone who has the little terrarium, does take care of it. So it's so funny about these things that are out of this era. Where they start out as somebody's passion, and they become the commodification of that. And I think that is part of how innovation, something so amazing, just an amazing idea or figuring something out that needs to be figured out, and then it just, and before you know it, it's turns into something else. And I'll get to that when we talk about the Gazing Globes.
What about the symbolism, Paul, of containing nature in a vessel?
Containing nature, when you move, the difference between botany and horticulture, botany, you're studying something in its own environment. Horticulture is you moving that plant somewhere else for your own purposes, be it because it's beautiful, because you want to just look at and enjoy it in your own pleasure garden, or you want to grow it for food, or you want to grow it for some substance that can be then extracted from it and turned into something else. It could be something fantastic. It could be the cure for something, some disease. So horticulture is growing it for a particular purpose. Botany is studying it. So that moving of that plant is a kind of conquest, or is a kind of, ownership. And we've gotten now to the part, to the level of this that is like inconceivable. We've gotten to the place now where the genome of plants are patented, where there's a seed vault in Svalbard, up in the Arctic Circle, where this the seed bank is built into the permafrost in case shit hits fan. Totally. There's all seeds are like basically they've been collected from every continent. They're put in there. They're cataloged, and you have to read about it. It's a very long story, but it's a place where you say like, okay, great, there's this seed bank. Well, then there's also it's called the Doomsday Vault. So seeds are becoming this very controversial political thing. So that aspect of going and getting the seed and taking it to another place is very much a political act. So the terrarium very much represents that. And on the other hand, we've done that. What are we going to do about it? We're very far along in this process. So the nurturing of looking at it is what was also I've realized is the evolution of my original intention.
So this was Paula's proposal for Madison Square Park. The project is installed and on view now. Mm-hmm. What she's created is really a forest for people to walk through. There are 18 transparent orbs, gazing globes, in the park on the southwest area of the park, on the gravel section. And people are already thronging to see them. It's exploded on social media. Images have exploded on social media. And it was very important to Paula to create the works at different heights so that children could look into the globes, the lower registers children could look into, adults could lift their kids to the very tall globes, and of course other people, wheelchair accessibility Paula thought about, and that you would walk through this forest of sculpture and take in the scene. So this is the proposal, and here is one of the actual globes. When Paula was first approached to propose a project in the park, we thought that she would create terrariums, and instead she came up with a different kind of terrarium. Do you want to discuss that a little bit?
Yeah. Paula? So, I was, being basically the terrarium lady, I was asked to propose terrariums to make terrariums for the park, and I said, it's already a cared for botanical or horticultural place. It's also has a Victorian feeling. The layout, the ornamentation of it is so beautiful. The park itself, the layout of when you see it from above, when you walk through it, the kind of care that it receives is exquisite. I said, it has all of the original intention that I had for the terrariums. I want to turn the terrarium like this. The other thing about it was the surrounds. There's many exquisite buildings that are either within view or close around it. And so I could imagine how they would be reflected. I immediately went, gazing globes, because gazing globes also belong to that Victorian era. They actually originate in 13th century Venice. They were these beautiful, perfect, they're probably close to perfect orbs that had reflective surfaces. They were then very much popular in Victorian times because of Ludwig of Bavaria. He had Mad Ludwig II, who had many of them at one of his palaces. And they are thought to, they were felt to be, to gaze into them was to see the reflections of oneself kind of, in the round. There's all this kinds of distortion, I'll get to that, or reflections that are repeated and turned upside down. And so they're related to the crystal ball in terms of seeing into the past or into the future. In this case, I wanted to be able to look in and have that reflection and have the kind of physics of the reflections, of what light does on very optically clear surfaces. I had to deal with the fact, if this is going to be in winter, of what these conditions were going to do. We've had years where, it could be 70 in December. We have, a year like last year and this year where it's incredibly cold. We have weather that is just all over the place. We all know that. So these have to be, bulletproof. And actually, these are bulletproof. Polycarbonate is a material that is used for that. It's used as a bulletproof guard. So I went to bulletproof. That led me to this material. So the materials used, and then in the interior, I very much wanted them to be also industrial materials, and to choose materials that are also going to be that love light. So the materials are very, the silicone, they're illuminated from below. It's winter. Though I'm telling something that is, using these materials, that I want people to look at something about contemporary life, our contemporary condition, our contemporary ecological condition, that we want to typically, out of sight, out of mind. I really want people to look at them. And I also want them to be beautiful. I want them to be mesmerizing and want people to engage with them. So in order to do that, illumination is one of the ways to do that. People come to the light. I believe that. So the illumination from below, all of the materials, silicone, acrylic, the reflective materials of pulverized CDs, these are things that just, do all kinds of magical things inside of the orbs. There is an atmosphere inside of them, things that I could never have even predicted. So the materials actually inside are all analog vintage radio parts, and crystals that are used in transmission types of technology right up to the digital age. I wanted to refer to the past, but technology of the past. So one of the things, though, that was the most incredible surprise to me is how people are using social media with them. And this was the thing that I think is the psychic part for me, and that is the living aspect. I am blown away by the creativity of the public and how they are using the gazing globes as a platform for their own creative work. They are using all of the different ways of manipulating I'm going to pretend this is a camera, an iPhone. They're taking their camera and they're using Instagram, and they're manipulating images. They're taking them straight on, whatever, different kinds of light, and they're making the most beautiful, 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 beautiful images of these globes with the architecture behind. There's one in particular that just kind of like blew my mind. I mean, it really looks like Goethe's garden. It looks like the Flatiron Building looks like a ruin, folly, and then there's all of these branches, very goth, and then the kind of, chiaroscuro light, and kind of outcroppings of rocks. It's so completely the past. And yet these also then can read, some of them are like, they manipulate the colors so that they look like you're on the International Space Station, you looked out of everything's gone wrong and it's like all foggy, but then there's this crystal like right outside the window, or it looked like a 3D movie or something like that. Everyone has a different take on it, but they're all very beautiful. Or when it snowed, just like, like a cake, like it's just, there's so many reads, and they're not selfies. That was the thing that blew my mind. I thought, oh, this is just going to be a bunch of selfie kind of opportunities. I've seen some people posing next to them, but very few of them are like, like this. It's not that. I was so surprised that the creativity that's being brought out, I would say, is the living aspect of it. So it's not botanical, it's the creativity of the public that is the living aspect that's flowing through them. And that I was just, I was literally kind of crying a little bit. It's really like this world that they're seeing. And it's really like, wow, it's still very, very much the living art, but it's the creativity that's inside of the people. It's completely free. It's completely open to their imaginations. And I think it is probably the original intention of all social media's roots, and of probably the brilliant people who were truly the creators, the programmers, and before the commodification of it. And I think that's probably the beginning of all creativity for human beings. And so hopefully that will, mean something.
I'm going to ask you one more quick question, and then
Yes.
I bet there are many questions for you.
Okay.
Paula, people are coming to these, and you call them gazing globes. Some people see them as snow globes. When it's snow. As you said, others are looking at them like they're crystal balls, and in some way telling the future or predicting the future.
Right.
When we call them futuristic or think of them in a way that has a negative content, that was not your intention at all. You wanted to think of them as these objects inside the globes now are part of the landscape, and we just have to deal with that. Can you just speak to that briefly?
Yeah, well, these materials are all materials that the earth cannot digest. They end up in the ocean, and the ocean cannot digest them. My feeling is we've invented them. They are created. These are great materials for public art because they are indestructible. It's better that we use things like this in a way that we say, these are very important materials. These aren't ones that you know what? I just had this takeout. You know what? Let's just throw this away. I just think that we should let's invert that idea. We've invented these materials. They have purposes that could be used because of their longevity, because of their inability to destruct. But let's switch it around a little bit. Not that they're invisible. Not that they're, the world's becoming really flat. Like, we're not talking to each other. We don't want to talk to each other. Like, I've seen the Seamless ad on the subway. Like, you don't want to give your credit card to a stranger. Why would you give it to somebody? Like, I can't remember what it said. It's just so ridiculous. It's like, you don't want to make eye contact with somebody you give your credit card to. Why would you want to give it to somebody who you... I don't know. It's something so ridiculous. It's like, as many people as you don't have to deal with, the better, right? Like, seamless. It's sort of like, oh my God. So I'm just thinking, it's the same thing with materials. It's like the more materials you can throw away, the better. And I just feel like, no, opposite. Like, if these materials are really strong, that means we should use them for things that are going to be important. Like things that mean something. They have to have meaning, not meaningless, meaning. Because just because it's out of sight, out of mind, it doesn't mean that they're meaningless. It means they're killing us, So you could say that's negative, but actually I wanted it to be neutral. Like, this is what it is. These are the materials of our time. I'm going to my intention was that they're beautiful and that you want to look at them instead of having them out of mind, out of sight, out of mind, and that they do last. The intention is for them to last beyond my lifetime, beyond my grandchildren. I have 2 wonderful grandchildren, beyond their lifetime, and that we get to reflect upon this time, and that we make decisions about this time. And I find that very positive. So, you equal that out, and it's, so it's everyone's decision what we do with it. The thing I came to this morning when I was thinking about this with the social media, it's like no one on their own can do anything about the condition we're in. We all kind of feel like, what can I do? I mean, I have to use this cell phone. I have to do all of these things. So if we have to do these things, why don't we make decisions with them that are more thoughtful, and that we're awake, and that we are aware of the decisions that we're making. So therefore, I don't think of it as negative. I think of it as thoughtful, and that's not negative.
Who has questions for Paula?
Yes.
What will happen with these pieces at the end of your installation?
Oh, well, they immediately, some of them travel to San Francisco to another public park. And so they will continue to travel, and hopefully some of them will continue to be in other, public situations, and perhaps private, in gardens. I'm very much a garden person, and so they are,
Have the works ended up in a lot of private gardens?
Have they?
Yeah, just curious.
Not yet, but there's some things in the works in
Always
terms of
interesting.
But
all of
these
it
other
is-
works have ended up in lots of private gardens.
Currently the things that are in the works are all public.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So we keep some in New York?
Not at the moment. Oh, yes, actually, perhaps, yes. No,
Molly,
about it. Yes.
I'm just curious if you have already, or if you have contemplated combining the two aspects of your work, the growing plant forms and the more kind of toxic stuff together. Because since we do exist together, and interesting to see how.
Well, they're only the things of these. The only thing that's would be toxic is if they are thrown away. When I say toxic, I mean they're not degradable.
Okay.
I do combine things like that. Planters that I make are made out of silicone. All these materials I use already. Planters that I've made are made out of silicone. Planters that I made are made out of acrylic. In terms of radio parts, they could end up in a living terrarium. They wouldn't hurt them. They're basically metal and types of plastics that are not, there's nothing in there that's carcinogenic. These, unless they start to, the ocean starts to break it down, and then it turns into some sort of the inside of a bird, and that's all they ate, and they have filled with bottle caps, something like that. As we all know, that we basically have to have room to grow food versus an environment that is just filled with throwaway things that will not degrade. I mean, so I have already combined these things.
Who else said? Yes.
Well, it's a pretty practical question, but with the living works, they keep changing as well because the plants grow. How does that work in practicality?
They need to be gardened. They need to be cared for. They need a caregiver.
So,
like
but
a garden.
in practice, you can go in and cut or
Yeah. It's just like a little garden.
You have a collector, right?
No, there's many of them out in the world, and they have someone to take care of them. Yeah, it's part of it.
Now the caretaking, of course,
and they need light and water, and they become part of your family. I know myself. I have them in my own house,
I'm struck by the expectation. First, I'm struck by the difference in what these communicate in daylight versus at night, and that our expectation is. I'm thinking more in terms of the Japanese bonsai and the kind of creation of a miniature world that you step into, and coming up to these in daylight and seeing, analog industrial parts and feeling some kind of a disappointment, or is it a commentary on the way we live, versus at night it becomes transformed into this incredible aesthetic experience? So is that part of your
light, the light is still, there's sunlight. What sunlight does with these materials is also really remarkable. There's a difference in the way sunlight reacts to them and to the surface of the polycarbonate globe. In the daytime, the reflections are so, detailed that, the gazing is really about, watching the sun, the clouds, let's say it's a dim day, a cloudy day. I stood there, I couldn't have expected it. I was sitting there and I watched the incredible detail of the clouds moving over the sun and all of the intricacy of the winter branches, and then the buildings bending because of all the optical things over this, elaborate, because the building of these for me was incredibly strenuous, and it took a year. I made one a week with a crew. They were very intense to make, so they're composed. They're not just just throw that in there. And the globe, to keep it pristine with that in there, I can't even tell you the blood, sweat, and tears that went into that. So the optical aspect of the material, the polycarbonate, and then the materials themselves, no matter what light they're in, is something to look at. And then to see it change, to come back in another light, at night, or something like that, is, you're seeing it anew every time, depending on what day it is. Yeah. Yes, in the corner over there.
Can you talk a little bit about the plinths? I know that you are, obviously sometimes you don't have them in the standing works, but you have to be thinking about them in all sorts of ways, both the functional and they have to be sturdy enough foundations, but obviously gracious enough.
Do you mean
The pedestals?
Yeah.
Do you mean which part? Do you mean this part?
All of the display.
Oh yeah, well that was very, very, very much worked out. I wanted to have the this is acrylic. I don't know if it might be complete there. That's also made out of acrylic. Acrylic also, like I said, loves light. The light, be it sunlight or especially the LED light that's in the pedestal, which is fiberglass, travels up and travels all the way around. It just illuminates the entire thing, and it's very planetary, like a ring of a planet. They also have that feeling too, like planets. That exists day or night. That also gives a feeling of respect, I think, to the globe. Was my feeling about it. It was very carefully considered, the distance. That was several months of consideration and trial and of getting what those proportions were. And then the surface and the form of the pedestal itself, very, very considered in the practical sense for the public. But also, this is the first time, and Alyssa really knows this, that I have used something so classical. The classical form of the pedestal, holding something that has that degree of, the natural forces that were really like my muscle, I guess is the word, and the material. It's when I was creating them, I was working against gravity. You have to picture, like, you don't know how that stuff got in there. I do, and I'm not going to tell you. Anyway, but that stuff is moving. It's it's like, it was crazy to get like a wild experience to get that in there, and then to keep it all the polycarbonate optically clear. So that was really a tightrope walk. I didn't abandon one of them. I wanted to, but I stuck with every single one of them and found the solution.
So we have time for one more question. Rachel? Oh, I'm sorry. Up in, yes,
Rob, me.
yes, Rob.
Oh, that's okay. Someone earlier mentioned, it might have been Brooke or it might have been you, the connection to, or not the connection, but the landscape artists of the 60s, the heroic out there. And I was wondering if you see any connection between the landscapes that you make and those much more heroic works.
Oh, you don't think my work's heroic?
Well, I think it's very intimate, which is not something that I would think about when I was thinking about a Smith set, for example. So it's not that it's not heroic, it's just that it's not the first thing that comes to mind. And anyway, even if it is or isn't, I just wondered if you could talk about it.
No, but I think that's an interesting way to put it.
What?
That it's non-heroic.
Oh. Well, I didn't say that.
No, I'm just curious. No, you use those words, so I'm really wondering about that. Like, because if the male artists of the 60s are heroic because of their scale and the distance, why is not the intimate scale and what I've been discussing, why is that separate than that? Why that word?
Well, I wouldn't call what they did involved with nurturing and caring either, in the same way that you've been talking about the works that you are creating and what's your impetus. So
let's just start over. What was the real question?
Well, I just wondered if you could see any connection between those large-scale landscapes and the intimate landscapes.
Well, I'll just refer to a Smithson quote that I especially have pondered. Let's put it that way. A degraded hell is better than a degraded paradise.
Well, on that,
thank you.
Thank you so much, Paula.